Our first speaker is Representative Aaron Regunberg, who is running to be Rhode Island's Lieutenant Governor. Since his election to the Rhode Island House of Representatives in 2014, he has led campaigns to support working families, reform the state's criminal justice system, and expand renewable energy. His legislation increased the tipped minimum wage for the first time in 20 years and earned sick days for 100,000 families who previously did not have them. Please welcome Aaron Regunberg.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for having me today. And much more so, thank you for the work that so many of you have been doing day in and day out to keep the resistance alive and well here in Rhode Island. I am incredibly grateful for the organizing, the advocacy, the activism that I've been seeing from so many people here, both focused on Congress and encouraging our federal delegation to not just engage with the resistance, but be the leaders of the resistance that we really should have for Rhode Island. And also I've been grateful for the energy that you've put towards a building that I'm very familiar with, the Rhode Island State House, to make sure that we're pushing our state Democrats to step up, to take responsibility, to use the tools and resources we have at the state level to protect us from these incredible assaults coming out of Washington every day. So I'm grateful to be here, and I know a lot of people in this room. There's some people that I've already met for the first time, so I guess I'll start right at the beginning. My name is Aaron Regunberg, and I'm running to be your Lieutenant Governor because I know that big change is possible, and I've seen how badly our system needs it. Now, I've been in the State House now long enough to see the way that corruption and backroom deals are holding us back. Of course, if you're wealthy and well-connected, that's not such a problem. You know, if you can write the big checks to get into those back rooms, like Walmart does, like the payday lenders and the NRA and Big Pharma do, then your voice is heard pretty loud up there. But for everyone else, for all the Rhode Islanders that can't write those big checks and get into those back rooms, folks are shut out and ignored. We need more public accountability, more transparency for all of our elected officials. And I think the only way that we can accomplish that is to bring the people's voice to the State House. You know, we need more public input, we need more voices at the table, and we need more people like all of you who are organized to take on these fights that matter. So I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I know how to organize. That's how I got my start in politics, actually organizing in our public schools. I founded a citywide nonprofit in Providence called the Providence Student Union to help young people come together and make their voices heard. Through PSU, I've helped young people in Providence win some real changes in our schools: healthier lunches, a better approach to standardized testing, ethnic studies classes so kids can see themselves in their curriculum, transportation so thousands of young people can take the bus instead of walking 3 miles through the snow and rain to get to class. And so it was really working on issues like these with these incredible young people and also families and teachers that really taught me that big change is possible when voices from the community actually have a say in the decisions that impact them. So that is what inspired me to run for state representative back in 2014. And it's that same kind of people-powered change that's made possible the legislative victories that we've won since then. I've been proud to help bring people together, work in broad coalitions around our state to make some actual impacts in people's lives every day. I led the fight to increase wages for thousands of families, including the first pay raise for tipped workers in Rhode Island in 20 years to help all the single mom servers hustling tables to make ends meet. I fought for bold climate action and brought together environmentalists and businesses and labor to get some concrete policies through to expand access to the benefits of wind and solar energy in all of our communities. Every year since I was elected, I've introduced legislation to create a single-payer healthcare system for everyone in our state. And I am not at all ashamed to say that I have an F from the NRA. And that comes from introducing legislation to ban high-capacity magazines, to ban assault weapons, to fight for gun violence prevention. And as was mentioned, I was very proud this year to lead the fight to guarantee paid sick days for 100,000 Rhode Islanders who never before had that security. important so that families won't have to keep making those really painful choices. Do you send your kid to school sick? Do you not care for your elderly loved one on the one hand because you're risking your job or your paycheck on the other? Those are the choices, those are the kind of fights that are really personal for me. Like a lot of folks, I was raised by a single mom, and she taught me growing up how important it is to treat families of all kinds with fairness and respect. So that's where a lot of my values come from, my family. I was super lucky as a kid. I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandma, the endlessly tenacious Bunny Regunberg, Bunny was her name. Bit of a misnomer. She was not a cute and fluffy person. She was tough. She was a fighter, and she had to be. She was executive director of her local Planned Parenthood in the years before Roe v. Wade. So Grandma Bunny really taught me from a young age the importance of empowering people to make choices for themselves. My grandpa Ralph was born in Rosenberg, Germany in 1930, and he became a refugee from the Holocaust. He was one of just a few in his family to survive, and he came to this country in 1948, like so many before and since, looking for freedom and safety and opportunity. My grandpa Ralph taught me that our democracy and our rights are worth fighting for. That standing up for what's right is a fundamental responsibility. And so that is why I'm running to be your lieutenant governor. I think we need a statewide elected official who can put the focus on leveling the playing field, on bringing people together to win real change. And who really means it when they say it's my job to be a voice for public accountability, to be a voice for all the folks that are getting shut out of those backroom deals that we have at the State House right now. And unfortunately, as Indivisible understands better than anyone, the importance of that work has become even more urgent since November of 2016. In the scary days after Trump's election, I helped organize one of the first major meetings to plan Rhode Island's response to this dangerous agenda. Some of you were there, over 1,000 people from across the state packed into a school cafeteria. And together we've helped build a movement with all of you. And you've led this movement to make sure that we are organizing against the Trump agenda and for Rhode Island values and Rhode Island families. But I actually think that in Rhode Island, we've got to go beyond that. I think that we can be leaders not just in the resistance to the Trump agenda, but I think, and Indivisible has understood this and has led this fight, I think that we can be a model for the kind of bold, positive, alternative vision that the Democratic Party needs to be able to offer nationally if we're going to have a shot of winning back power from these madmen. With the right leadership, and more importantly, with the right organization and mobilization and bringing together of good people like you all across the state, I think that we can be that leader. We can secure health care as a fundamental human right for everyone, not a privilege for those who can afford it. We can fight to make sure that every Rhode Islander has a living wage and pay equity, whether you're a man or a woman. We can rebuild our crumbling public schools. We can make sure that our immigrant neighbors are protected, folks who are contributing so much to our economy, to our culture. We can launch a Green New Deal. Just like Rhode Island built the first offshore wind farm in the country, we can put thousands of Rhode Islanders to work in good paying jobs, taking clean energy to scale, showing the world and the nation that it's possible. And we can and we will stand up to protect a woman's right to choose no matter what happens in Washington. So, okay, that's a lot of fights, that's a lot of work ahead of us. And obviously no one person or office can accomplish all of that on their own. But I think the Lieutenant Governor's office can actually play a really important role in helping to organize and lead all of those fights. It's a constitutionally independent office. And that means I think that it can be that independent public advocate that we need. It can use the statewide bullhorn, the bully pulpit, to really put a spotlight on the changes that we need, to bring that public accountability, to elevate the issues that we're talking about today. And it's got some real resources to do that. All of the fights that we're talking about here, we are up against entrenched interests that can afford legions of corporate lobbyists and attorneys. I see it at the State House every day. And all the folks who are fighting the good fight, whether it's Indivisible, whether it's Planned Parenthood, whether it's the ACLU, trying to do 1,000,001 things with like one staff and a bunch of volunteers. There's never enough capacity. So the Lieutenant Governor's office can fill that gap, can focus on organizing, on bringing people together, on building the coalitions we need. And lastly, it can focus on the kind of internal legislative organizing that we need if we're going to shift the power balance in the General Assembly. I think I don't need to say in this room that in Rhode Island, Democrat doesn't always mean Democrat, right?
No.
Whether it's a woman's right to choose, whether it's common sense gun violence, whether it's fighting for working families, whether it's fighting for climate change, we know that we've got a pretty conservative balance of power in the General Assembly. A big part of my focus since I was elected as rep has been trying to get our good people who are up there for the right reasons to get more organized, to have a more collective strategy and agenda. We've done the fair shot agenda, getting a bunch of reps together to say this is our progressive vision, and we're going to work for it together. We've made some progress, but it's hard. It's hard for folks to go up against leadership. We don't have any capacity. You know, the legislative leadership controls every staff person in that building. And so to turn the Lieutenant Governor's office into like a little rebel base camp, right in the State House, that can focus on that internal organizing, that can provide the scaffolding and the support that folks need to take on more ambitious change, to work together, to have some more independent public accountability in the system, that I think can be a real game changer. So that's the vision. You know, let's take that office for the people. Let's use those resources to put the people's priorities front and center and win a future that is fair for all of us. So again, I'm super grateful to be here. I'm grateful for all of your work. And I'm excited to have a conversation, to hear from all of you. Thanks again.
You can take a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm very glad that you're for people's right to choose when it comes to healthcare. And I'd like to ask you, what about people's right to choose medicine without having to go through, frankly, insulting rigmarole, paying for fake doctors to review their personal medical records, and if they want to be able to care for themselves without going through a tax and regulate racket, they actually have to open up their house to Norm Berenbaum to be able to come in and inspect without a warrant, and that's led to all sorts of horrible excesses, like he cut open a child's mattress in front of the child, for example, found nothing. And the second thing is that right now, people are mandated to grow these green plants indoors, and that costs 1 million watt-hours of electricity per pound of this valuable medicine. And then meanwhile, we have cops going around, and if they find 20, 30, 50 pounds, they take it away and destroy it. And so I'd like to know what you would do about that.
So I've been a strong advocate for legalization of cannabis, marijuana. I think the war on drugs has been an epic failure. We have incarcerated untold members of our communities in ways that have hurt them, have hurt our communities, have hurt our economy. And marijuana has been a big part of that. Cannabis has been a big part of that. So I've been a co-sponsor of the legislation that's currently in. I've also been a voice for that legislation, and in general, I think that it's really important when we go through legalization. And by the way, part of the economic argument on this is that it's going to happen in Rhode Island anyway. I mean, we're falling behind our neighbors. It's going to happen, and so it's a question not of when, but of not of if, but of when and how. And so if we want to get the economic benefit, we should act soon, but we also want to act carefully. And part of my fight on this has been making sure that when we do this work, we are doing it in a way that that recognizes the disproportionate harm that the war on drugs has had on communities of color, and making sure that we're not sort of creating a new profit system for mostly well-to-do white men, when the people who've been most impacted, people of color in communities like Mount Hope, which I represent, are sort of left out. So I think that's really important. But yes, in general, we absolutely need to do that.
Yes, sir. Two questions. Number one, who are you running against? And the second, what kind of problems do you have in running this? And secondly, what import does money have on your election? In other words, is it because of the policies you're telling us, or whoever has the most money?
So I'm running a challenge, a primary challenge against the incumbent Lieutenant Governor. That's something that I generally don't think happens enough in Rhode Island. We need some new ideas, some new energy to make the system work. And you know, in general, I always make sure to be clear that I'm not running against anyone. I'm running because I see some really exciting potential for that office to be an independent public advocate. Having said that, I think there are some very clear contrasts in this race between myself and the incumbent. You know, as I said, I've been really I've had a big focus on fighting to level the playing field for working families, whether it's fighting for a living wage for every Rhode Islander, whether it's fighting for paid sick days for folks that need them. The incumbent Lieutenant Governor has opposed those policies. You know, I've been an advocate for universal health care for everyone. Rhode Islanders already spend enough to have universal health care, by the way. We just do it in really inefficient ways, where money is going to corporate profits and billing and administration and advertising and CO bonuses instead of to actual health and patient safety. So that's a big priority for me. The Lieutenant Governor has opposed that. I've been a strong advocate for bold climate action. We should not be investing $1 billion in a frack gas power plant in Burrillville. We should not be investing almost $200 million of our ratepayer dollars in an LNG facility in South Providence and other new fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a difference between myself and the Lieutenant Governor there. You know, I have been a really passionate advocate when it comes to reproductive justice. We need to pass the Reproductive Health Care Act ASAP. This is not something that can just be shunted aside, and we can say this isn't a priority, which is something that the Lieutenant Governor has said. So there's some policy differences, but ultimately our campaign is about let's turn that office into a real public advocate that can fight for Rhode Islanders, that can take on that corruption and backroom deal culture of the State House.
Rhode Island has open primaries, which means that if you are registered as an independent, you can choose as you go in to vote to either vote Republican or Democrat. And there is a conservative group now that is urging, I guess the deadline to change your registration is June 12th. So there's a very conservative group now that's urging people to register as independents. And then when the primary time comes, to skew the vote against progressives. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So how does a group like this fight against that, or what do you fight against that?
Well, I think first of all we should recognize this for what it is, which is, first of all, we should wear this as a badge of honor. Actual Democrats in Rhode Island have been organizing, they have been running, and they have been winning, and that is freaking out the conservative entrenched interest and status quo. For folks who hadn't seen that, there was an email sent yesterday from the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, which is this far right-wing, Koch brothers aligned network that was urging their members, saying, if you're a Republican, you can disaffiliate by, I think it's June 12th,
yeah.
And you should do that so you can vote in a Democratic primary against progressives. And again, when I say progressive, to me those are core democratic values. I mean, to say that everyone should have health care, to say that you shouldn't be working 60, 70 hours a week and still grinding it out in poverty, to say that women's rights should be protected, those are core democratic values. That group, by the way, has already made very clear that they are going to be targeting our race. Some people might have received, a few weeks ago, there was a statewide mailer, which, by the way, that's a lot of money. It's like $50,000 to send out a statewide mailer that was attacking me and saying, it was all the usual Koch brothers kind of lies. And so I think it's interesting to note that these groups that generally have focused on supporting Republicans are now focused on Democratic primaries and trying to tear down folks who are running on strong Democratic platforms and progressive agendas. I think the answer is it's the same answer for everything. We need to organize. We need to out-organize them, and I think we can. They've got the corporate dark money. They don't disclose their donors. It's the same sort of Koch brothers system. But what we have is grassroots organizing and advocacy. And so our campaign, the strategy is we want to build the biggest grassroots field program for any down ballot statewide that Rhode Island's ever seen. We're going to knock on every door. We're going to have conversations with every voters. And again, when I talk to everyday Rhode Islanders, they support this agenda. The issues that Indivisible RI has set up as your priorities, whether it's universal health care, whether it's reproductive freedom, whether it's climate action, Rhode Islanders are on board. And so we think if we can talk to every voter, if we can knock on those doors, we should win this race.
Aaron, I could probably name 5 or 6 governors of the state of Rhode Island. I don't think I can name one lieutenant governor. So what are they supposed to do? I like what you said about what you're going to do, but from my perspective, you sound more like the governor than you do of a lieutenant governor who I don't even know what he does.
So what the Lieutenant Governor's office has, in my opinion, is number one, it's got a statewide platform, which if you know how to advocate, to use that bully pulpit and that bullhorn, can be a pretty potent tool. And it's got those resources that can be plowed into actually organizing, into bringing the different parts of our movement together to build the more powerful, progressive coalitions that we need to take on more ambitious policy change. So that for me is the
But
priority.
can you name one lieutenant governor who's actually done that?
So I'll say a couple of things. One, I think we've had lieutenant governors that have made a real policy impact. I think Elizabeth Roberts, she really took on implementation of the ACA, and she made Rhode Island have one of the best ACA implementations in the country. I think going back, Charlie Fogarty made some impacts when it comes to elder care. There are a couple specific responsibilities that the lieutenant governor has that I think are really exciting. For example, the lieutenant governor chairs the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. Now that's an issue, might not sound super sexy, but that is, everywhere I go in Rhode Island, folks are struggling to find affordable, accessible options for long-term care so that their loved ones can age in dignity. I've been working on a bill this year around home care. How can we invest in home care to make sure that folks can age in their homes where they want to be? And by the way, it costs us a lot less because when you go into a nursing home, it's incredibly expensive. So there's some cool, innovative home care or long-term care work that's happening in different states that I think Rhode Island should and needs to be taking the lead on because we know where our demographics are. This can be another area where we, like clean energy, where we have an edge, where we can take a lead. So I'm excited about some of those specific works, but in general, I think the value of that office is to bring public accountability. In New York City, they've got this office of the public advocate. It's what Mayor de Blasio was before he ran for mayor. Its focus is putting a spotlight, bringing the concerns of the community into state government, being that voice to sort of push back against the backroom deals that might otherwise happen. From my time in the State House, and certainly from my conversations around the state, people feel a need for more public accountability, and I think that office can fill that role really, really, really well.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We really appreciate it.